Hello and welcome to Close Calls on the 42.e, brought to you in association with Air Sport. We have reached the deep end of the Champions Cup pool stages, and it is sink or swim for two Irish provinces while Leinster float leisurely into the knockout stages. My name is Gavin Casey. I'm joined in studio by Sean Farrell of the 42. How are things, Sean?
How you doing, Gav? Keeping well, yeah. Interested in a few of those team selections that will have a bearing on the weekend ahead. Yes,
indeed. We've got a special guest to talk us through them as well. Here's Johne Murphy. How are things?
Good, guys. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, Johnny. We were just asking before we came on air there how your sleep situation is. Last time you were on, you were telling us difficult times with the Bambinos. Things have improved.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, we're probably at about kind of 5-6 hours sleep now compared to 2-3 hours when I spoke to you last. So all going well. To be fair, my wife is she's playing a blinder, so I'm only kind of called upon every second or third night, so it's not too tough.
Yeah.
She's in the jar, thankfully.
You're taking the role of finisher, so fair play to you, Johnny. Look, we might as well get the elephant in the room out of the way firstly. It's been a week, well, probably 10 days, dominated by talk of doping in rugby, anti-doping, Gerbrand Grobler playing for Munster. Look, it's been covered to death in a way, and we've heard different takes on it, particularly from journalists. You know, as a man who played for Munster, you're familiar with the club ethos, and you know, you obviously have a grasp on, say, the fans' perception of what that club means to the area, the locality. If you were a player in that dressing room at the moment and you're training alongside that player, Grobler, what do you make of the situation? Like, have Munster and the RRFU kind of let Munster's players down by bringing this situation upon them kind of out of the blue and seemingly for no reason?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the biggest frustration and probably biggest disappointment for me upon it all was, you know, the first two Munster representatives to talk about it are Conor Murray and Peter O'Mahony, who are two of the biggest names that Munster have. I think that should have been someone who was front and centre in the signing of it, and probably should have been taken away. I personally don't think any player should have been on media duty this week, given they knew where the line of the questioning was going to go. It was obviously going to happen, and the first two people to talk about it are his teammates, and it's putting the lads in an unfair situation. I think that should have been someone from higher up in the organisation, and it should have been spoken about. Interestingly enough, I know Philip Brown spoke about it the other day, but you know, he doesn't directly have an input into that decision, as he stated the other day. And I think, you know, the guys who have essentially rubber stamped this, one, Rassie's not there, but the guys who are currently in situ who did rubber stamp it, they haven't answered anyone's questions on it. And I think from an ex-player point of view, I find that quite frustrating because, you know, I'm quite friendly with the guys that are still there, and you're putting, you know, from a pure selfish point of view, you're putting friends in a really awkward situation that they, you know, what are they going to do? They're going to stand up for their teammates. That's the reality of team sport. As far as they're concerned, Geraint has made an incredibly, you know, bad judgment call. He was wrong, and it's something that shouldn't be tolerated in our game. But, you know, he served his ban, and he is now a teammate of theirs. So what are they going to do? They're going to stand by their teammates. That's just reality of the situation, and I think it's unfair that they were put in that situation in the first place.
Yeah, Sean, we were speaking beforehand, just before we came on air, and I suppose our own opinions on it. You were kind of the opinion that, like, yeah, sports people should have a second chance. I was kind of saying, yeah, but it shouldn't be, like, a 2-year ban isn't a strong enough deterrent, but you pointed out that it has now been extended and has been for the past 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, Munster fans have been quick to throw the name Carl Dufava around this week, and he was on a rival Facebook live show.
We can mention him.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting interview, but he made the very good point that this rule has changed now. So if Gerhard Grobler did fail that test now, it would be a 4-year ban. That was changed in 2015. But absolutely, it's been a hell of a week one way or the other.
Absolutely, like, it was interesting as well. Sorry, Johnny, go on.
I do think, and look, Paul Kimmage and these guys, they can sometimes, they can, for the want of a better word, kind of not sensationalize it, but you know what I mean. They can kind of go after something that sometimes it might not be there, or they try and get the most out of it. But this is one of the topics that I actually have agreement with Paul on, and the fact that everyone deserves a chance at redemption, 100%. And there are second chances, and that's fair. But I do think there is some credibility in the fact that there needs to be. He needs, I think Garant at some stage needs to come out and speak about it. Maybe not now, but sometime, and give details of what happened. Like I think that Fava has done. I've seen programs where he's gone in and spoken to people about the decision he made and how bad it was and how it's going to affect him for the rest of his life. I've seen a program on World Rugby, and he does that now with kids and tries to educate kids in the correct way who are 15, 16, 17. And that is a real chance. That is trying to change the game for the better. But, and I think some Munster fans, they're correct in using him as an example, because I think that is an opportunity now for Garant to do something in that regard in later, may not be now, but certainly later on in his career.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting as well. You mentioned Philip Brown a minute ago, Johnny, and he did obviously address the situation, but I know when it was put to him that, is there a possibility that down the line another player who had been previously banned for doping might line out for an Irish province? He labelled it a nonsense question, and you're kind of like, is it really? Because this happened as recently as 6 months ago. You've made this decision. I know it wasn't Brown himself, but the decision was made, and therefore there's surely credence to asking, will it happen again? I mean, is it purely because people get a bit cranky that they change their policy completely on this second chance concept?
Look, my whole thing on this is the right people aren't answering the questions, and that's something that I feel quite strongly about. In the transcript that Munster sent back, they, was there due diligence done and was it spoken about? I think was one of the questions, and the answer was yes. Okay, elaborate, please. Look, I'm not. Look, Munster's obviously very close to my heart and stuff, and I get quite frustrated with the organisation at times in terms of how they handle things like this, because they need to, sometimes the best protocol is stand up and say, okay, unfortunately we made a decision, we have to stand over that decision now. Looking back on it might have been the wrong one, but he is here now, he is going to play, we have given him a second chance. You may think it's wrong, that's fine. We made a decision as an organisation that we were going to give him that chance after he played somewhere else. Maybe in the future that it won't happen again, but that's the decision we made. We have to stand over that. But at the moment, the right people aren't answering the questions, and that's kind of a frustration that I have. The brand is affected, like it or not, is affected by this. That's just reality. But I think sometimes you just have to hold your hand up and actually the right people answer the questions, rather than two of your most senior players and putting them in a really, really tough situation.
As you say, Johnny, I think the handling of this has been the big issue. I mean, if Gervin Grobler he's entitled to play, the big issue, I think, is that the IRFU have said that they have a zero tolerance policy. They do great work in a proactive way to kind of educate young players and prevent doping in this country, but then when it suddenly comes on our doorstep, it's like you said, there was a change of policy. I think the problem was that there was no policy. There was no policy to change, and there should have been. If you have a zero tolerance policy, it's not enough then to have such a big gap below that.
Yeah, but I think as well, you mentioned the problem comes to our doorstep, but they brought the problem to our doorstep. And it's unfortunate to label, look, he is a human being at the end of the day, like, we're calling him a problem. And another thing is, like, for Munster, like, as you were saying there, Johnny, yeah, Munster could come out and say, well, maybe we made a mistake here, sorry about that, but it would put him in an absolutely terrible position, given they had made the decision to bring him there. To then say they regret that decision, it kind of compromises his entire ability to, you know, enjoy himself within the organisation and earn a living as...
Yep.
Sorry, yeah?
Yeah, but he's contracted, so he's going to be a Munster player. You know, I think everyone, and it's very hard on him to be in this situation. And I think there's a few people that, yes, okay, he made a decision, he was wrong, cheated, fine, okay, he served his time within the laws of the game. But he is now cast into all this, and he doesn't really know where he is. Where, you know, you can have meetings with someone in private and then say something completely different, or say, look, we have to say this because this is how we have to handle it, and then he knows the situation. Where at the moment, it's just his teammates, as any teammate would do, and that stand by their fellow teammates. So, yeah, look, there is a frustration, but I do think now it has been spoken about a lot, and we need to. It's happening. This is where we're at, so people need to move forward with it now.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is the perfect segue to discuss what's actually happening on the pitch this weekend. It is a massive weekend for Munster. Look, we've seen them in this position before, where you get down to the last day, you need a victory at home, or even sometimes a 4-try bonus point victory. Like, I can't help but feel that the cast or draw in the south of France was a missed opportunity for Munster, where this weekend might have been almost taken care of for them had they won a game that they probably should have won. But even as recently as last weekend in Paris, I actually thought like Munster came away from that game with a lot of credit, where I actually thought they were poor in large parts. Like, that game was, again, similar to the Castres game, definitely there for the taking, and they kind of continuously seem to shoot themselves in the foot in some of these away games. Like, I don't know, you'd expect them to get the job done this weekend, Johnny, but, you know, they've probably made a little bit harder work of it than was necessary.
Possibly, yeah. Look, I think there's one big key factor in all this, and that's probably their discipline in the fact that it just goes against momentum, where in the previous two games against Leicester they were so good in that area, and they had a dip over the kind of the Interpro series, and then, you know, last week it shifts the momentum after they score, or they're on top and they give away a penalty, and then, you know, they get marched 10 yards. Those little things, they seem to be a bit frustrated over the last 4 weeks for whatever reason. But I think they played quite well last week, certainly in patches, to get themselves. But I think there's some isolated incidents that you can look at that go, they don't do that, they win. I think that's where the frustration comes from. But I think they've layered their attack and varied their way of playing quite well over the last 2 or 3 months, and there is huge improvement in what they're trying to do, and being a bit more, playing with a bit more width, being a bit more expansive. So they are definitely moving in the right direction. They get a good win this weekend, and, you know, they hopefully get a home quarter. No one's going to want to come to Thomond Park, and then you see where you are after when you get to the semis. You know,
discipline aside, they are great to watch now, Johnny, aren't they? I mean, this is a completely different attacking setup to what we've seen from them getting to a semi-final last season.
Yeah, and I think that's something, and, you know, quite publicly last year, Rassi said, look, I'm not going to jump straight to stage 4 here. I'm going to make sure that they're really good at kick chase, kick receipt, and ball carry off 9, and then we develop. And he got them to an incredible stage. They now are layering it now, and there's more variation in what they're doing with short runners and runners out the back. And they have, you know, with the size they have in terms of Chris Farrell in the back line, you can vary that quite a lot. So, look, they are. Last week was, you know, it was a weird game to watch because you didn't know what way the atmosphere was because of the stadium and all that kind of stuff. But when you actually if you watched it just from a rugby perspective, it was a great game, and they played really, really well in patches.
Yeah, Johan van Graan hasn't made any changes to the team. I suppose we usually associate an unchanged team with maybe a good victory, but I can't help but feel on this occasion it's actually the right call again, in that they did come close to a fantastic victory last weekend, and it gives the same players the opportunity to right some of the wrongs that you're talking about there, Johnny, those little incidents that probably cost them the game.
Yeah, and I think they can, if they get if they can put the squeeze on Cast early. The Cast coach obviously came out and said, after last week's game, he was like, now that'll teach the media for showing we don't take Europe seriously, even though we're kind of out already, and so on. But I think if Munster can put the squeeze on and not, they get a score, not let Cast back into the game, try and build her for, they go 7-10-0 up. You don't want a case where it's 10-3, 10-6, 10-9 then at half time. You're under a bit more pressure. So if they can get a couple of early scores, just build the score 3-6-9 themselves, and then put the squeeze on at French side at home. You would think, and history dictates this, that they would go for the gate with about 20 minutes to go, where you can hopefully pick up those third and fourth tries, which would hopefully guarantee them a home quarter.
As a player, Johnny, going into this type of game, I think as a supporter you're looking at permutations and tables, and as things stand, tables and all this. As a player, are you aware of, I don't know, are you aware of kind of points difference and little things like that, or is it we hear all the time, we need to just win the game first, but for some of these teams it's not going to be enough. So how do you deal with that as a player?
Yeah, you just have to try and get out what you want, the maximum you can out of the game. You do know going into the game that if you get a bonus point win, you get a home quarter. You know those things, so that's your target. It does affect the captains and the kickers' decision making, not probably in the first 10, 15, 20 minutes, but certainly at 30 or 40 minutes. Those decisions are, you've scored a try, you're 15-0 up. Okay, here we'll go for the corner in the kickable position, or we might take a scrum. That it does affect your decision making compared to other games. In terms of the sides that need to other results go their way, you only have to look after your own shop and decide, get what you can, and then hopefully things fall your way. I remember when I was over in Leicester, we beat Munster in Thomond Park. We knew going into that game, about 25 minutes, 30 minutes before kick-off, we got to lose a bonus point. We were in the quarterfinals. So there was first targets. It was about trying to stay with them and then keep going. Obviously, the game went a bit changed perspective after Lewis's try. But you do know what you need to do. But if it's outside your control, you just have to take what you can get and maximise what you can get out of the game. Yeah.
In Munster's case, I think it helps that this game is pretty early in the weekend. I mean, they have a pretty straightforward calculation. They need that win and bonus point, and the points difference doesn't really matter too much to them, so they can just focus on getting those 4 tries, and probably the chase and pack won't win by as much as they did.
Well, we'll see how obviously the other games transpire, but yeah, as you mentioned, Munster know what they need to do. Ulster have a fair idea as well. I mean, and I suppose if you're talking about Munster having an advantage playing early, the fact that Ulster will know exactly what they need to do because they're playing late on the Sunday may be of benefit to them. I suppose Ulster are almost like a metaphor for this final pool stage round where kind of nobody really knows what's going to happen. It's just sort of sit down, watch them, and we'll see. But obviously going to the Ricoh Arena, a lot of it is going to depend as well, I think, on the start of this game, Sean, in that if Ulster steal an early lead, Wasps already kind of have a mountain to climb, and at that point it may in their heads become a little bit too steep, and then you could see Ulster pull off this historic victory, really, probably for them.
Yeah, I mean, they can break your heart every other week, Ulster. I mean, they're always capable of that amazing win last weekend, as they showed last season, beating Claremont at home as well, and then they can just show up or not show up, as the case may be, the following week. But as you say, start is everything. I mean, once they show that attitude, once they show that they have their their head right, as they showed against La Rochelle last week. They were in danger of being steamrolled for the first 20 minutes last weekend, but you could see in every engagement, every contact, that there were arms flailing. They meant business, they meant serious business, and then when the game did eventually turn their way, they were able to keep the foot down and keep powering on, and that's the only kind of way. They need to not think too much about the state the rest of their season has been in, and just kind of they'll be putting everything into this.
What do you make of their how they're shaping up, Johnny, going into this one? Obviously they're coming in on the back of a fantastic victory. Wasps coming in on the back of a horrendous defeat, really, as it transpired, against the Quins team who'd lost their previous 4 pool games. Do you fancy Ulster this weekend? I suppose you just don't know.
It's a big one for them to back up a performance, because that's kind of what they've been lacking. I know they beat Quins back to back, but Quins were kind of, it wasn't in any way, shape or form their first team. So it's a big one for Ulster, not just in the Champions Cup, but actually in the overall context of their season, that they need to back up a performance now and build momentum, while Rory Best and a couple of the other, Ian Henderson guys are away during the Six Nations, because you saw the difference that Bestie makes to a side. So they need that momentum going into the Six Nations when he's not going to be there. So it's just about putting back-to-back performances in, I think. But like you say, you just don't know. And the problem is, Wasps will know exactly what they will have to do as well. So if they're still in the hunt, then they know that they have to get a bonus point, and that makes them very dangerous. But yeah, you'd hope that I think Ulster will get a win. It just depends on what happens across the road and across the wall and the head-to-head, in terms of what La Rochelle could do to who God only knows what poor old Quins could send over there, and what happened. Like, it could be an absolute massacre. You just wouldn't know. Like, it's, where Quins are at. I think Haskell sending off last week, that won them the game, really. Where they send, an A side over to La Rochelle, who need 5 points to get out of their group to guarantee them, possibly 7th or 8th spot. It could be a very long evening for Quins.
Absolutely. I suppose, like, Johnny, you mentioned, say, the game where you came across the tournament with Leicester and you turned Munster over, like a historic day in the competition, really. Like, as a squad or even as an individual, is your mindset different going into this massive game when you're travelling, you're going to be almost playing against the crowd a little bit? Perhaps not at the Ricoh Arena, it's not going to be packed or anything probably, but what's the difference in mentality required for an away game where you need a victory as opposed to a home game, particularly when you're going away and you need a victory as opposed to like coming away with a losing bonus point?
Well, I think you're just out of your comfort zone and you know what you have to do, so there's a kind of sharpness, and probably with us that time there was a physical edge to training probably like no other week, unless it was pretty bad for physical training sessions, but that there's just a kind of just a hard edge to training in the week, because you're not going to have the comfort of, if things go against you, the crowd gets on top. You don't have the comfort of the whole home crowd to lift you. You basically have to find that from within. So these weekends, you're a bit more focused, and you're out of your comfort zone completely. So you have to find the momentum and those gear changes from within, and not rely on, in any way, shape or form, the crowd that are there in the day.
Yeah. Well, before we take a couple of predictions of it, Johnny, we need to talk about Leinster as well. Obviously, Sean, their hard work is done, and it's an experimental team, one doubtless influenced by a certain Mr. Schmidt, I think it's fair to say.
Absolutely not. Joe Schmidt has absolutely no influence on provincial team selection, as you well know, Gav.
Sorry, Joe. Yeah, that's right. Jordan Larmour on the right wing. It'll be interesting to see how he goes there. Yeah,
very interesting. Obviously, I think we expected Rob Kearney to come back in for this one after he was benched last weekend. I think it's very important for Larmour to be able to show that he's able to cope on the wing. in these big away fixtures. That's something in Ireland and Leicester they will definitely want to have a good look at him there, because Carney is still number one probably for both province and country. So and there's a long way for Jordan Larmour to properly displace him there, I think. Who else? Robbie Henshaw, 13. That's another one I think with a view to Six Nations. That's very timely to get him a run there. And nice to give Johnny Sexton a rest as well, to give Ross Byrne a little reward for some excellent form really in the first half of the season.
Absolutely, I'm sure Byrne will be looking to prove a point there, having been omitted from the Six Nations squad. Johnny, I'm interested by Robbie Henshaw, 13. I think if you were to look at him at Connacht, like when he's played 13 and played like really expressive, expansive rugby and been a sort of a tour de force at outside centre, it's been probably alongside Bundy Aki inevitably in the green of Connacht, and that's likely going to be Ireland's centre pairing. Like I remember speaking to Luke Fitzgerald about this last year, where he reckoned that Henshaw's sort of playmaking ability is actually overstated, and that he is essentially just a very impressive battering ram and defensively capable, as opposed to, again, somebody who's going to, I suppose, break the gain line constantly. What do you make of him as 13? At 13, like, is this a viable option for him, both in Leinster colours and Ireland colours going forward, or is it very much a makeshift situation purely on the basis that Gary Ringwell's is out?
No, I certainly think there is. He's had some really deft touches in terms of hands down the edge last weekend. Really nice. Just a very simple 3v2 where he was under pressure, and then he had a really good long ball out to I think Fergus McFadden on one stage. So he's certainly a very capable ball player, and it's just he does have that versatility that you can move him around. People forget that at the very start, when he burst on the scene first, everyone was talking about a battle that he's going to have over the next 4 or 5 years with Rob Kearney as Ireland's 15, and then he moved back in. So he does give you versatility, and his skill set dictates that he can vary his game from position to position. So I think Luke might be a small bit a bit overly harsh on Robbie there. I think he does have those delicate touches that he can use, when used in the right fashion. It certainly lends himself that he has a very good ball playing ability in the centre in that wider channel.
In the wider context of the competition, Johnny, would you agree with the sort of growing consensus that Leinster are now top dogs and probably favourites, slight favourites to win the whole thing?
Yeah, without doubt. I think you look at the kind of 10 teams that are going for are going for the 8 really. Out of probably Leinster, Claremont, Scarlets, Munster, Laois, Ulster, Racing, Saris, Exeter, you're kind of thinking, they're way ahead of anyone at the moment. Saris are probably the most dangerous, but they've lost Billy Vunipola now with a broken arm, so they might not, they don't get a result this weekend, the result that's needed, they might not get out. So I think it's fair to say that Leinster are probably very, very tight favourites for both competitions. I would think they just seem to be an improving side that is ahead of everyone else. And Munster are also an improving side, but they're just not there yet. But then again, Leinster 2 years down a coaching coaching ticket compared to Munster probably only 2 months down under Van Graan.
I suppose, like you mentioned, Saracens there, and they've almost been, now you wouldn't say they've been written off, obviously they're still kind of lurking, like they haven't gone away, it's that kind of a thing. But if they do get out, nobody's going to want to draw them either, because you sense that once they get a little bit of momentum behind them, that they kind of could, they'll go far again, presumably.
Yeah, look, I think I'm not sure my math isn't great, so I'm not sure.
You're in good company here.
Yeah, so I don't know whether if they win they get out. I think the 2 teams that no one wants and who are going to end up kind of first, who the Saris or Exeter might end up 8th, and you don't want either of them, because I think they both just they're capable of a one-off performance anywhere in Europe that can topple a top team. So yeah, you'd hoping that one or two of them might hopefully go out, and then it really is then, you know, you'd fancy the Irish squad, either, you know, any of the Irish sides if they got into that without those sides, you know.
Absolutely. Well, we'll ask you for your predictions then. We might start with Leinster. I mean, it's kind of I would say a dead rubber. It's a chance for their young guys to have a go off it, but still a tough fixture on paper, regardless of what's to play for. How do you see the young fellas getting on down there in the south of France?
I think that group of players that is probably, you know, they went to Munster and put in a ridiculously good performance on Stephen's Air the 27th. So I would think that, yeah, I think they're going to go down. I think they're going to get a win, but I don't think it's going to be in the fashion that they won last week. So, or against Ulster, I think it's going to be a real tight game. But you're going to have, you know, it's a big afternoon for James Ryan and taking on a couple of, you know, monsters in what's in the Montpellier pack. So, yeah, I think they'll stand to the test, and I think they'll grind out a victory by maybe 3 or 4 points.
Ulster going to Coventry.
It's a tough one. Depends on the other results. If Wasps have a chance of getting out, it could be a tough afternoon, tough Sunday evening for them. But if they back up the performance last week, I think it's going to be tight. I think they might shade it by about 2 or 3.
That'd be great.
It would be great, yeah. I mean, I think all week long, like, we've been kind of sizing up these games and trying to figure out where they're going to go, and then team sheets come in and make you second guess everything. Like, I think, as you say, Johnny, I think if your prediction of Leinster winning down in Montpellier with that team comes to pass, I think bookies will have to stop taking bets on them to win the championship. It would be a huge statement if they went without Johnny Sexton and Sean O'Brien and still won.
Johnny, sorry, Sean, go on.
No, I think they are still capable of maybe a losing bonus point with that team, but yeah, no, I think it's a big ask with that younger crop.
Gents, will it be business as usual for Munster at Thomond Park? We've seen this game 1,000 times before, I feel. I mean, usually, probably more often than not, it's been Premiership opposition, just by however the table has lied. Castor at home. I mean, Castor still have a slight chance of sneaking into the last 8, so it's not as if, and as you mentioned, Johnny, their coach pointed out last week that, you know, well, there's what you get for saying we don't take it seriously. Do you still think Munster can get the job done? And I suppose, maybe more pertinently, with regards to a home quarter final, can they get a 4-try bonus point in the process?
I think it's going to be close for, you know, 40-50 minutes, and then I think they put the squeeze on them, and they, you know, I think they get that 4th try in the last 10 minutes. So yeah, I think it will, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as everyone had originally hoped it would be. You know, that victory last weekend, and it was such a resounding victory that it gives them a squeak. So you don't know. But look, I think they are going to get 5 points, but the manner might be a bit different to the way everyone thinks it's going to be.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of rugby to be played, John, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the sooner it kicks off. For us
to sit here and say, yeah, 4 tries, they'll win it, not a bother.
That's a definitely 5 points there in the bag.
Bona fide 5 point there. That's it. Well, lads, thanks a million for your time. Johnny, thanks for joining us, and best of luck. Enjoy the rugby over the weekend.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.
Johnny, thank you.
Thank you, Gav.
And thanks to Air Sport and to you at home for watching as well. And to yourselves at home, enjoy the rugby, and hopefully we see the other 2 Irish provinces join Leinster in the last 8. But until next time, take care.